introduction to one of my favorite people on earth, Mr. Stephen Oliver, who is with the Advisor Marketing Podcast. Now, Stephen is a true maverick, and I mean that in every sense of the word. Not only in our business, but I have to tell you, his clients universally love him, and they grow at rates that they wouldn't believe it's possible. Now, on this podcast, in each episode, Stephen is joined by various members of his team or special guests to share insider secrets to rapid growth and high net profits in your financial advisory practice. So I just want you to know you're in for a wild ride, new information, and a lot of exciting new future because of Stephen Oliver.
So Mindy, why don't you pull up the group and let's kind of go through those ads and talk about them and talk about what they're doing. So let's skip that one for a second and kind of go on down a little bit. So you know what I think happens a lot on these ads, and I don't know if you can get it where we can see those a little bit more thoroughly, Mindy, but if we start looking at these Facebook ads, is one of the things I found kind of interesting, Greg, as I was looking at them, is almost all of the financial advisor ones that have been showing up in front of me now that I've been trying to get them to, are almost all a Facebook lead form. And it's, as opposed to taking them to a landing page and going through now they may have it connected behind the scenes. I haven't opted into all of them. The ones I've opted in tend to have a real anemic follow-up format. And Suzanne, on the one that you looked at, so if you scroll down a little bit, Mindy, if we're...
That's this one that we're looking at now.
Yeah, so look at this one. And
oh, I didn't see
already, Mindy.
What?
The one you were on already.
Yeah,
oh, okay.
That's the one that I saw.
Yeah, that one. That's the one that Suzanne asked about.
Yeah.
Notice that, and Greg, critique it a little bit. The actual ad says is we offer one-on-one education sessions, and then it says basically apply now, and the offer is a free, no obligation estate planning session. What would your analysis be of that being the first step?
Well,
no, I'm asking Greg.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it's a pretty big step to take. It's too big a step to take, so that, I have to want to work with Carol Eddy before I would want to do this. I've already decided I'm going to get married. I'm already decided I'm going to, work with her. And I mean, if she spends a boatload of money and gets a boatload of, volume of getting these ads out, she might get some traffic from it. And in one sense, the traffic's going to be better because they've already decided they must want to work with her. But there's not really any good differentiating reason why they would want to work with her. They'd receive information on their stage of planning, and I mean, it's really lame and boring copy. So I don't even really know why I would want to marry this person in the first place. So there's nothing unique about it.
Her differentiation is that she does estate planning, which of course is also true of another 200,000 advisors around the country.
Yeah, I'd like to think about it like, if I was a doctor, everybody has an MD or DO. If you're a primary care physician and you have an MD or DO, how do people usually decide which MD or DO they're going to go to? Well, they figure out which one's closest and use their insurance company. But all the MDs or DOs think that they're different. Yeah. If you're going to try to build your practice, you would want to be differentiated.
Yeah. Well, and maybe to say the first part that we were saying differently is there's a natural hesitation to talking to a human until I've decided I want to move to the next step. And in an environment like Facebook, one is it's more like a broadcast environment where it kind of comes and goes fairly fleetingly. But number two is it's interruption advertising. In other words, you're getting to somebody who's looking at their cousin's wedding photos or cat videos or whatever they're looking at. And then you're getting in front of them saying, hey, you need estate planning, I'm your gal, or I'm your guy, right? So it's almost a step too far in this medium to book an appointment as the first step and as the call to action. And again, I'd like to, in all of these, and we may be able to pull those numbers up, is look at what their actual numbers are, because nothing beats testing, right? So if she was getting, if her target is, I need 5 qualified new clients a month, and she's getting 10 people a month who book an appointment, and she's closing half the people that book an appointment, then it's working just fine for her purposes, assuming the cost per lead, the cost per enrollment is or new client is adequate. So a lot of this is hypothesis based upon a lot of experience on analysis. But you see what I mean, Suzanne? If typically my first step on something like this would be, here's a free book, or here's a free report, or we're going to do a free webinar, free video, something that doesn't scream out, hey, talk to somebody who's going to pitch you something, right?
Yeah. I think I agree with you. I really like the approach, that this is an educational, at least it's presented like this is going to be an educational event or happening. But I think, it takes a lot of moxie to say, okay, and we're going to do this session. You just met me, like you said, Greg, and we're going to talk about your estate planning, which is very personal. But I like the idea of doing something similar to that, only doing a short, 3-minute video or something.
Yeah.
And then if you like this, then we could have a one-on-one class or something like that. What do you think?
Well, yeah, sure. And usually what you're doing with something like that is, see, video is a very good medium, right? Either a book or video are both really good. The nice thing about video, and it doesn't have to be short form, but the nice thing about video is they get engaged in your personality. And if it's longer, you can teach them enough about all the stuff they don't know to know enough that they need to contact you, right? Mm-hmm. I've heard, I don't know if it's Dan Kennedy or, somebody else, but they said, you need to teach them what to do, not how to do it in those kind of videos. But the good thing on video is your personality comes through. And, for some people, they're just not going to click with you, which is fine. But the ones that do, all of a sudden feel a more powerful connection. It's why, podcasting and YouTube channels is, people feel like they know them. It's kind of the way that people are about celebrities. They feel like they know them ahead of time, especially if it's some kind of reality type thing as opposed to scripted. But Mindy, let's look at some of these others and talk about it as we go here. So now let's see. This one, God, I don't even know what their call to action or their offer is on that. Let's see.
I don't like the wording. It's like all over the map. We're proactive. We're this. We deliver. We're result oriented. It's conservative. It's they have all these pop words.
Oh, well, their call to action is schedule an appointment right now. Same thing, right? So that's not.
Oh, okay.
There doesn't seem to be a link to be able to do that.
I probably cut it off. These are photos. I'm sure there was a, schedule or something. So let's go on. Let's go on down.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, now that that's a Wall Street Journal ad, Fisher Investments. But let's stick on the Facebook. But this is a good. If you go back to that though for a second, Mindy, is pay attention to anything Fisher does.
Yeah.
How long will your portfolio last in retirement? That's a different way of saying, are you afraid you're going to run out of money? You're going to have years left in your life when your bank account runs dry, or are you afraid you'll run out of money in retirement? And I might, in fact, if I was going to test this, and I'm sure they have, I'd be tempted to replace the word portfolio, right, with your investment savings or something that immediate clicked. They may have tested and found portfolio works better than the Wall Street Journal and Ladies Home Journal or Field and Stream or something. They might use a different word in the headline.
What about money? Just the word money.
Yeah.
How will your money last in retirement?
Bingo. Something real simple. Again, notice in context, a reader of the Wall Street Journal thinks differently about the world than, somebody reads, I use the word example, Field and Stream or Ladies Home Journal, but pick some other publication that's not as financially oriented. But notice even in this environment, they're not driving them directly to an appointment. They're driving them to a special free offer. And almost everything, probably everything I've seen with Fisher, that's their first step, is the things you should know about mutual funds, why you shouldn't buy a annuity. I can't read that one.
If you have a $500,000 portfolio, something.
Yeah, that's the screening mechanism. And in this case,
right, I thought they had an actual ask up there.
Yeah.
Great eyes, Greg.
They did say schedule, go to something or call the number for a free consultation. So they are actually asking for a consult.
Yeah, and they have the QR code. There's an ad in print, which is again something that changed dramatically. Hardly anybody was actually using it repetitiously pre-COVID, and now it's something that most everybody who's had to open a menu in a restaurant now understands.
What is that? I hate to sound naive.
It's a QR code.
It's just like a barcode, but what happens is it's during COVID, it's been lots of restaurants, instead of handing you a physical menu, it would be you just take a picture of it with your phone, it would open the web page. But what it does is it tells the device a web address, which can be a very complicated web address, doesn't have to be simple. So it can have all kinds of embedded coding and stuff, but it tells them a web page to open, right? And it used to be you had to have a separate app for it, but now iPhone and Android both come. You just open the camera, and if you hover over a QR code, it'll just open the website directly, like an iPhone will open it in Safari. So it's a shorthand mechanism. Like somebody who's in a retail spot, they can have that on the front door. They could have the website address, but they could also have to get our free report immediately, go to our website, and they can have the QR code so somebody can just click on it immediately. But again, what happened, Suzanne, is when this came out, I forget how long Greg, how long ago was it? 5 years ago or something like that?
What, QR codes?
Yeah.
No, QR codes have been around for a lot longer than that, but
Yeah.
I think it's only really because of COVID that people have been using a lot more, because you go into a restaurant, a lot of the menus were on QR codes, and Apple and Android set it up so that when you pulled up the photo app on your phone in the recent iterations of their devices, that it defaulted when it saw a QR code, it would recognize it, and then it would load up the web page. It would give you the default. So as you said, you didn't need a special app. So it's been maybe a decade that QR codes have been available, but it was useless until recently.
Yeah, I remember as marketers, we were all really excited about it until we figured out that nobody knew what it was, and it was too many steps to figure out. Where it started getting used, I guess, probably more broadly was Eventbrite or Fandango or Ticketmaster, places where you're using it for a concert ticket or using it for a movie ticket or something. But even that, the user didn't really have to understand it. They just pulled up the thing they bought online and they got scanned on the way into the theater. So the dynamic was different. To me, it wasn't until COVID hit and people started using them in restaurants that the general public started to pay attention. And as you said, Greg, until the phones automatically did it, rather than you had to download an AT&T app or something that had it built in to utilize them. But let's look at a couple more of those Facebook ads, Mindy.
Okay.
Now this one is, it's kind of like paying attention to Fisher, right? Because Smart Asset, their business model is take you and two other advisors and sell you the leads that are coming off the site, right? And so they are testing constantly to figure out what's going to work, because their business model is they've got to get the lead in at the front end for a cheaper price, and they're going to sell it to an advisor on the back end. And so they're constantly A/B split testing and one thing or another. And by the way, they've got a pretty sophisticated process through. And Suzanne, this is an important consideration is, I don't know how many people we've talked to, Mindy, who are buying leads from them or buying leads from somebody else. And some of them are pretty sophisticated. And in almost every case, they're disgruntled with it and are looking for something different to do. But what my question always is, well, from the time they opt in to the time you get the lead, how quickly does that happen? And having been somebody shopping all of this, I can tell you it's pretty damn quickly, right? So they can set it up where the advisor gets it almost immediately. But then what happens is, just like most other media, is the advisor then assumes that the leads are flaky, rather than assuming their mechanism for converting them is impudent, right? And Greg, I'll tell you, I've opted in on Smart Advisor a number of times, and they give like 3 different people the leads. Maybe 2 out of 3 initiate one call, 1 out of 3 initiate a couple of calls. Almost never do they have a sequential autoresponder sequence by text, sequential autoresponder sequence by email. And if you opt in on Saturday, most of them call you on Monday or Tuesday, rather than immediately.
Yeah, and I was going to say, and I bet you the calls were hours later.
Yeah.
Oh, after the person called, you mean?
After,
No,
after the person opted in.
Yeah, if the opt-in is at 2 in the afternoon, the call might have been at 5, or the call might have been at even 3 or 4. And we know that for any lead, the call's got to be within 30 seconds, like within a minute.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, it dramatically improves your likelihood of getting them on the phone and converting. And again, I don't know. I'm at 9 different advisors or 15 or whatever, some multiple of 3, have gotten me as a lead now, and none of them have shared a contact record with me. I think one guy tried calling me 3 times, and actually followed up with a text. So good, good on him compared to anybody else. I'm not a fan of have somebody else go do the advertising and give it to more than one person. And I'm also not a fan of a lead site that was generating leads for you that gives them to you 48 hours later, as opposed to have some mechanism to give them to you immediately, right? So Greg, in response to what you were just saying, the folks who were following up, they were getting the lead immediately by email. Now, I don't know if there's some text follow-up or not where they were getting the lead. From a standpoint of me getting follow-up, there wasn't that level of immediacy, nor was there, kind of like what we would do, saturation bombing, voicemail, text message, email,
Right.
sequential, ongoing. That really wasn't happening. And I see most of these guys, they also give up pretty quickly. They try for 3 days to get hold of of the lead, and then they another flaky lead from Smart Advisor, and then they give up.
Yeah.
And-
Now, how do you know which list provider is not handing out the same names to 3 other people, or that's just part of what happens?
Well, with the different ones, it's built into the agreement, right?
That know that other people are getting the same names.
Yeah, or not.
Oh,
And you can look at it a couple different ways. I think it was Michael Kitches. I went through a spurt where I listened to all of his podcasts and read all of his blog posts and stuff. And he made a really interesting comment. He said it's a sad industry where people choose their advisor based upon what zip code they're in. And that's certainly what is happening with Smart Advisor is, basically they're drawing a radius and giving it to the 3 closest people. I think the furthest one I've gotten so far was in Colorado Springs, which is, 45 minutes or an hour from here. That'd be like San Francisco to Oakland, or something. But,
and then how do you know how, quote unquote, fresh that lead is? You were saying that some of these, they get the lead and then they right away send it to the client.
Well, if you were going to work with one of these companies, that would have to be built into the conversation.
It's Lee Milt here, and I'm delighted to interrupt you today and let you know that I've been working with Stephen Oliver for 10 or 15 years now. He's a great guy. I love all the research that he does. And I just wanted to let you know that if you're enjoying the content on this podcast, then you really want to make time to visit advisorwealthmastery.com. And why should you do that? Well, because you're going to receive 2 of his great books and actually one of mine called Success is an Inside Job. You'll also get a lot of absolutely free material on growing your practice through effective marketing. So again, take the time to go to advisorwealthmastery.com.
Is it that I get the lead? How quickly from them filling out the form do I get them? Right? Is there some faster way for me to get them? So, for instance, I don't consider email to be a particularly fast way to get a lead. I would rather it be their system texts me and I can initiate an outbound call because the link in the message. But some of them are fairly sophisticated, I would imagine, without having it all in front of me. I don't top of my head, but some of them probably have what's called an API bridge, which means that their system can hand it off to your system, and then your system can kick off all kinds of follow-up. Others, you get an email in 48 hours. That's not very on top of it. And then the other question, frankly, while we're on this is, do you want it to be that you and 2 other people are chasing the lead, or do you want it to be that anybody who raised their hands only coming to you? I think my natural inclination is I don't want to be a comparable to 2 other people because they're in the same zip code. On the flip side is we know that most people's follow-up is so pathetic that a couple of other people having the lead doesn't mean that you're really going to have stringent competition for the prospect. Well, what would you add to that, Greg?
Yeah, I wouldn't be afraid if I was paying money and I got leads. I'd be assuming that I was going to be better at following up with them than anybody else. So in that regard, I don't mind paying for some leads that I might be competing with, because I'll beat them no problem. So that's completely true. However, given my druthers, I would rather not have to. Yeah, I'd rather be assumed that I would be the exclusive person doing it. And I'd rather just generate my own leads anyway,
right?
And my own marketing and get people, but I'd buy everybody else's leads up too. But that's sort of
depending upon what they were charging. Right.
Ultimately it's cost per new client that I'd be wanting to measure.
Yeah.
Including my time to work those clients. You know, I mean, if it was cost per client, but each client cost me 2 hours to acquire, then that might be another factor involved in the acquisition.
Well, but the nice thing is the lifetime value of a new client that you get, Suzanne, you know, lifetime value of any, you know, financial advisor can be so high, right? That really you can afford a pretty good amount of money up front, you know, to get the sale, assuming you get the sale. You know, because as you know, I mean, year over year turnover is relatively low. I mean, and it's relatively low in the industry, even though client satisfaction is also relatively low in the industry, you know, which means an awful lot of people who don't particularly love their guy or gal also don't go out of their way to change unless somebody else gets in front of them with a much more enticing proposition.
Is it your impression that that most people are unhappy with most of their advisors?
It's just data. It's just data. 60% of people are unhappy with their financial advisors, and half of those are doing or would like to do something about it.
Yeah, that was the number one. It was, and in fact, that most recently was an internal Northwest Mutual. They did a study, and that was exactly the number. Was 60% were unhappy, and about half of them were actively contemplating moving. You know, which creates huge opportunity if you get in front, because you know what a lot of people worry about is, well, almost everybody I would target in that niche or in that age group already has somebody they're using. Yeah, but the odds are they don't like them very well, right? And part of that is all the stuff we've talked about in the past. Very few advisors are good at the gifting. They're not good at newsletters going out. They're not good at having live Zoom meetings, live webinars for their clientele, client appreciation events. I mean, all of that kind of stuff, right? And so, you know, if I'm getting together with you once a year or twice a year, especially if it's just by phone, and you know, updating my plan a little bit, I don't remember you from one session to the other particularly. I was just having that conversation with somebody else of, you know, no matter how great a job you think you're doing for them, if you're not top of mind awareness with a warm, fuzzy feeling, you know, they're having a conversation with a friend and the friend has a need, they don't think about you immediately. And, you know, if they're frustrated with money, you're the place they point at, even if it's an unfair direction to point. But again, I mean, the nice thing about looking at this ad is we know, one, has been tested. Two is they're A/B split testing it all the time. And, you know, their business model, and this is a big company selling a lot of leads to an awful lot of it. They've got to get the cost of lead, you know, at least half of the cost that they're selling it to other people. So part of the thing is look at what they're doing and understand the, you know, the pieces of it that are working well. Mindy, let's look at some of these others.
Okay.
I don't know. I've probably posted 30 of them recently. What was that PDF? That was probably a direct mail piece. Click that one. Yeah, this is not in the Facebook advertising, but this is a direct mail piece. I pulled this out of mailing. What? Is that going to open?
It's going to open a new window. Give me just a second here.
Okay. This one, if I remember correctly, is a dinner or lunch meeting.
And you know, they seem so passé to me, because you know, in the 80s and 90s, that was like the way to get clients in the door, is entice them with the dinner, and they would, you know, then you'd have the people, most people who came were people who just came to the dinner. So I don't know, it just seems like an old-fashioned thing to do again. I'm surprised people are doing that.
Yeah, now it's in there half upside down. Well,
it's just that one flap that's upside down.
Yeah.
So it's like, and now where can you have dinner these days that, you know, there's safe distancing and all that other So,
Well, you're in San Francisco, so you're in the hub of people being overly freaked out about going outside of their
That's true.
home. You know, in Colorado, it'd be easy. Texas or
yeah.
you could go anywhere.
So is this a geographically, you would say that this is done more in certain areas of the country than others?
Well, I'm just talking about within COVID is there's been, you know, not to talk about COVID. There's been a lot of research. One of it was a survey by the New York Times that looked at people's attitudes about COVID and actually correlated it with whether they were self-reported Democrat, Independent, or Republican. And one of the questions they asked was, if you test positive for COVID, what's your odds of being hospitalized? If you're hospitalized, what are your odds of dying? And I believe at that time it was done, the correct number was 3% of the population, if they got COVID, was going to end up hospitalized, and then a similar percentage were actually fatalities. I forget what the exact number was. And in that one, you had Democrats guessing that between 35 and 50% odds of being hospitalized if you got COVID, and you had Republicans more or less guessing about 3% were the odds, as the majority were guessing. So therefore, people who leaned liberal were terrified, and people who leaned conservative were not terrified. And you could go through the list. It correlated to everything from, are you willing to go to a restaurant? Are you willing to go to a movie? They asked them all kinds of questions like that. But they found the more they were on the Democrat, further liberal they were, the more terrified they were. And the more they leaned conservative, Republican to, very conservative, the less concerned they were. But what I found kind of interesting is the ones that self-reported were Republican were pretty much right on what the risk was, and people who self-reported liberal were 10 to 20 times catastrophizing over what the real odds were. So that's why I make the snarky comment about San Francisco. Is San Francisco overreacted relative to the state of California. California overreacted relative to the United States. The left coast, i.e. Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, LA, massively overreacted compared to the South. And New York, New Jersey overreacted compared to, the Midwest. So there was, that's not me saying it, it's looking at attitudes and looking at lockdowns, not lockdowns, once there, no, that was the reaction. So that was the reason I was making that comment. This, if I remember, was a piece that was mailed in Illinois,
Okay.
if I remember correctly. Not that that particularly matters. Now, let's look at it, though, from what you just said, Suzanne. Is this a dated activity that shouldn't be, can't be used, or won't work today versus 20 years ago? I'd answer absolutely not. It's just as valid. Now, it's more difficult. It's more difficult to fill seats. So the cost per person that shows up is going to be higher. But look at the other thing you said, which is I agree with completely. Look at this mailer. If you go back the other way, I think it may have been upside down, the other direction. But see how much space is utilized with the enticing meal, right?
Right.
See, to me, I would much rather it be that the bait is they're going to get a free information on something that's burning keeping them up late at night. The copyright example, this is an old example, it's from the 30s, I think, but a copyright by the name of John E. Kennedy. His line was, you want to get inside the conversation already going on in their head. Dan Kennedy, unrelated, but he says you want it to be, their reaction is, oh my God, do you have our house mic'd? Sounds like you're listening to the late night conversations going on at the kitchen table, right? So the more you can get to really aiming in at what their fear and what the conversation is going on in their mind. And then the more likely they are to respond. And by the way, in this industry, the reason why attendees get called pejoratively plate lickers, which is a sad way to think of prospective clients. But the reason for that is if the primary hook to get somebody in is a dinner that looks salivating, then you're going to get an awful lot of people who, perhaps have nothing better to do than show up and get a free steak dinner, right? And hence closing rates of a third of the room rather than 80% of the room. On the other hand, right, I'm making up numbers, but if it costs me $100 to have somebody in the room and I got a third of them to appointment, so it cost me $300 to make an appointment, let's say the $100 includes the expenses, but that's unrealistic. But let's say, just for the conversation, if it took me $100 to get them in the room, and then a third of them made an appointment, so it took me $300 to make an appointment, and half of the ones that made an appointment ended up as client, well, I'm still only costing $600 to get a client. And assuming that client was going to be worth, let's say, $5,000 immediately and $50,000 over the lifetime of them being a client, I do that all day long, right? So, I'm ultimately willing to pay every bit of what they're going to give me immediately, or what they're going to give me within the first 6 months to get a new client. A lot of people aren't as aggressive as that, right? But if you look at, a lot of marketers talk about lifetime value. So if somebody's going to be worth 50,000 or 100,000 over their lifetime as a client, you've got to factor in time value of money. So if that comes in over 10 years, it may be as relevant a number as how much are they likely to pay me in the first year? And will I still be profitable in the first year? Will I be profitable in the first sale? Perhaps even by the cost to get the client, right? Now, Greg, what would you say about the structure of this mailer?
Well, there's a lot of things about it, and it's hard to see how the whole mailing is put together. Is this like a full page one or a 6x9 card?
That's a good question. I think it's a cards.
Yeah, I think it's one of those large postcards.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to figure out as you were flipping through it.
A
So
5.
the billboard side is about the steak, right, Mindy? Is that how this is positioned? So if you,
Can you move it down, Mindy?
so the billboard side,
Oh yeah, it's totally about the steak.
yeah, this side's about this, which looks really good. They did a good picture of food. But I would say better if I was advertising for the Italian restaurant than if I'm advertising for retirement planning.
Yeah, it almost looks like there's 3 panels here. So
There's a flap.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I don't really notice.
Oh, I see. It's an enveloped piece where this piece goes in the envelope. You see, the dear personalized thing goes in the envelope. So as we're looking at kind of squirrely.
Yeah, like
It's an envelope piece
flap.
Okay, that turns into an envelope.
Yeah.
So the Lori Giesman is the personalization. And
Yeah.
doing this for the complimentary dinner event. That's nice that they have personalization. Yeah, I mean, that's probably going to get somebody's attention.
There's something on here that I keep missing. It's refers to somebody, I don't know, it's maybe on the next page. Yes, the Chad Slagel show. So I guess they advertise on those shows, you think, or?
Yeah, that may be their show. That they may have a radio show. Yeah, that's his name. So I don't know if that's a pod. I can't see enough whether that's a podcast or whether that's a YouTube or maybe a radio show.
You can scroll down past here.
Yeah.
And this is what you were asking about.
Yeah, this is about them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, Mike.
It's Lee Milt here, and I'm delighted to interrupt you today and let you know that I've been working with Stephen Oliver for 10 or 15 years now. He's a great guy. I love all the research that he does. And I just wanted to let you know that if you're enjoying the content on this podcast, then you really want to make time to visit advisorwealthmastery.com. And why should you do that? Well, because you're going to receive 2 of his great books and actually one of mine called Success is an Inside Job. You'll also get a lot of absolutely free material on growing your practice through effective marketing. So again, take the time to go to advisorwealthmastery.com.
My guess is, Suzanne, on this one. Again, I don't know these guys. I just pulled this out of who's mailing what. But my guess is they're mailing a lot, and they're getting a good return on investment on it. And
I think, don't you think that it's to what zip code they're sending it to that has a lot to do with it too?
Well, no, I would say you want a better list than that, right? So your reaction is right, but I'm absolutely confident that they're pulling a list that's much more targeted. I would guess that, based upon what the other copy is, they're targeting, let's say, 50 to 65-year-olds at a certain level of household value, perhaps, within a targeted geography, right? This event is for retirees and pre-retirees 55 and up. So I'm sure they pulled a list that's 55 and up, since that's what they're targeting. But they don't want 55 years and up. And I've been working at 7-Eleven part-time my entire life, and I have no household income or wealth. So, and you can get very specific on lists depending upon how deeply you target. You can start with what's called a compiled list. We'll talk more direct mail on a different day, but you can start with a compiled list, which is they live, in that neighborhood. They have an income of this level and up. They have a household, the home is worth, they're a homeowner. The home is worth a minimum threshold, and they're 55 and up in this case. You can get a pretty targeted list that's just a compiled list. That's like an Info USA list.
Yeah.
Or you can get one that's much more in depth, right? So I could do the AARP list, and I'm sure I can get the AARP list. I haven't looked in a while, but I'm sure I can get the AARP list segmented by income, by asset level, subset by age. So I'm not mailing to people who are 85. I'm mailing to people who are 55 to 60, let's say, within a certain asset range, within a certain range. And if they're not retired, with clearly designated job. Yeah, there we go. That's Champaign, Illinois, is where that mailer was. But does that all make sense? I mean, we'll go back to the Facebook ads, but if you were testing and baiting them with the stake got 3 times as many people, but baiting them with the experience was closing 80%, baiting them with a stake was closing 30%, then the question is how many more people show up in the room? Marginally, do I get some more clients out of the deal? And is the value per head worth it, right? So you make all those kind of decisions when you're doing that.
I'm sorry to interrupt. One of the things I noticed on the card, which was very interesting, is said no alcohol is served.
Right.
That's very thoughtful on their part.
Well, and the other thing is, if you're doing it and you're not doing a meal either, and you did something like this and it was turning into a webinar, then you can do it remotely.
Yeah.
like the guy we talked to the other day, Mindy, he's trying to do multi-state. So, but before pandemic, he was traveling. So now he could convert that model to multi-state, but not traveling. And it could be webinar, it could be Zoom. So then you could use a similar, if you did a postcard, then it could be converted into something where it doesn't have to be, physically in person.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, if you're going to do it as a webinar, see, you could take the same model and bait them with something completely unrelated, right? Or you could use as bait something that's right on target that only your prospective client would be interested in. And which approach worked better would be subject for testing, right? There's, an unrelated example, but, you look at magazine subscription sales. Of course, they've kind of taken a header in recent years, but, like Sports Illustrated would have the related bonus, but then they might use the completely unrelated bonus, and to see which worked best. So you see, maybe some survivalist magazine, I've seen them where they have like the crank radio with a little solar panels. So if you're stranded on top of your roof in Louisiana, you have the little thing. Well, I mean, maybe that's directly related to the person who's interested in the magazine. Maybe it's completely unrelated, but I'll subscribe to the magazine just to get the free thing, right? I tend to prefer it's completely related. So if they're responding to what the bait is, lead magnet is often termed online. If they're responding to the lead magnet, then I know they're a good prospect. In this case, the lead magnet, you could argue, is the steak, but just because I like the steak that's shown in the picture doesn't mean I'm interested in their information. Let's look at some of the other Facebook ads, man.
I think just one more note on that. I think the geography has a lot to do with what's hot and what's not, I think, too.
In what way?
In geography, in terms of, the steak dinner being, an enticing thing versus an area for the longest time here on the East Bay that it was kind of looked down at. People wanted to really get an education. They really wanted to learn something. They really want to hear the actual manager of such and such a fund talk to them, etc. So it was more interesting to them, or they were more interested in attending because of what was going to be discussed or who was going to talk.
Yeah,
so that seems to be,
I don't think that's so much a geographic thing. I
okay.
think that's
A screening thing with your marketing.
Yeah, that's a targeting deal. So, if I was, I have somebody I'm working with who wants to target C-suite in tech industry executives, and if I'm a C-suite, whatever it might be, chief marketing officer, chief financial officer, CEO, whatever, in a $500 million tech company, you're not enticing me with a free meal.
That's true.
Right? So,
I'm inviting you to play golf for the day.
Well, I'm
or something like that.
I'm in all likelihood going to respond to somebody who can fix a problem that I perceive that I have, as long as they're not going to want to have me do 10 hours of my time chewed up in order to figure out whether they're the right person or not, right? I know in my case, right, I get hit, I'm in an area, which would be not high value for San Francisco, but for Colorado, the home prices here are 2 million to 6-7 million per home on 5 acres. Well, I get hit constantly with, the free steak dinner, one thing or another. But, some of my neighbors who are retirees, maybe they find that enticing. To me, nobody's enticing me on a $50 steak to go chew up 2 hours of my time to go listen to somebody pitch their deal, right? If they were, you know, if it's a free book, a free report, a free information session, a 30-minute video on something I was in my mind, yeah, I would do that. But I'm not going to go sit through a sales pitch because I'm going to get a steak, right? It's just, to me, it's just like somebody trying to pitch a timeshare. You know, timeshare.
What do you think is the most effective kind of lead in or promise or something? Like, I mean, this particular ad that we have up now is similar to the other gals ad about a one-on-one.
Yeah, I think that's the same person.
But I think the way that you market, I really liked your whole process.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that, because some of these are closer to that. Is, you know, we're typically trying to find a really low risk way for somebody to raise their hand. Free report, free book, bunch of free shit, whatever it might be, right? Free webinar, a free live interactive video session, but something that's a super low threshold for them to raise their hand and say, I'd like to learn more about that. And rarely, if ever, trying to bait the hook with something that's unrelated, right? And then is we're putting them through a sequential step where there's more education about what we do, but also making every effort to convert them to an appointment. Recognizing usually that if it's not, they're already familiar, right? Very few are going to immediately want to go to an appointment. So the ad saying, schedule an appointment now to talk to us free, rarely is going to be the most effective way, even if it's the most direct way, right? So Suzanne, talk about, you know, what happened with you is, you know, you go to a webpage, and whether it's in Facebook or it's in LinkedIn or Google or just a website, whatever it might be, if it's an online ad, it's going to take them to a landing page that's somewhere, depending upon what the source is, going to be name and email address all the way to a complete form that qualifies them based upon revenue and, you know, and so forth, right? But if it takes them to a little short page, let's say it's just an email address and a phone number, let's say, then it's going to take them to another page that gives them a reason to give us mailing address and tell us more about them, right? Yeah. And what's going to happen with almost every, you know, the online marketing version of that, it's called a funnel, right? So the idea is literally like a funnel is, you know, you pour people in the top end and you keep pushing them through steps to get them down to the bottom end. And on some online marketing, the goal is to get them to buy something. Our objective is to get them on the phone and then to qualify them, then have another phone call and qualify them, and then have another phone call. And if they qualify, to, you know, bring them on as a client.
Which is mostly your objective, is to get them on the phone and then either get them into the office for an appointment.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, assuming they're qualified, right? So
right.
If you've got somebody who's never made more than $35,000 a year and they have $12.50 in the bank, and they don't have a retirement fund coming as a federal employee or something like that, what are you going to do with them, right?
Nothing.
Yeah, you don't want to, you know, we could do something where you could round those people up all day, and you could spend 12 hours a day having 30-minute conversations with people that you have nothing to, you know, no opportunity for, right? So a lot of the purpose of the targeting and the funnel is to make sure you're only using your time for people who are really good prospects. So if you look at, in our case, not to sound in any way condescending, is Mindy only talks to what, Mindy, 10% of the people who fill out a form? Bob on the other side is probably down to like 5%. What percentage would you say you end up actually?
I think it's probably a little higher than 10%, but yeah, I mean, I definitely try to, and there's some of those conversations that are very short.
Right. So, but to use the example, doesn't matter what the percentages are, we're sorting them out so that we're only using her time for the ones that look like they're a good fit. Then she's screening, what would you say, Mindy, 75%? Right, in Bob's case, he's screening like 95%, but you're screening like 75%, so 25%, then you put on Greg's plate, and then Greg screens what, Greg, probably 25% off of that,
Right.
off the top, and then if he doesn't screen them, they go on my plate. So I'm only getting to them after they're down to 5% of what came in the top of the funnel, right? Go ahead.
So would that be a similar kind of concept that as a financial planner, that I would be approaching that type of
Right, exactly.
funneling?
So the first step is list selection, in other words, who the ad is shown to, and then qualification steps on the form on the way in. There's other ways to do it, but let's say on the form on the way in. Sometimes qualification step is they have to fill out the form, they have to give you data, and then they have to show up to like a live video meeting in group, let's say, right? And then from there, you schedule the appointment. But what happens is, as you go through the steps, is as you build more lead traffic, I mean, you're kind of a solo operator right now, is, take Peter as a contrast. He's a multi-million-dollar practice, and Kai, who's the new hire, is the call screener. So he's going to do always initial outbound call to any prospect, get some qualification information. In most cases, they're already pretty qualified before they get to Kai, but he's going to get some qualification information, decide whether it's worth putting on Peter's plate or not. And the next step, frankly, might be slot somebody else in the middle, like what we do. Because what you want is, you want to be talking to people who are 90% likely to buy and 100% already qualified to be the one you want to talk to.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
But that would be the next step, is you have enough lead flow and enough client base that you have somebody like Kai, some comparable to him, that is screening them ahead of time. And by the way, that step, along with the digital and physical follow-up steps. So if you go back to what our funnel looks like, is somebody opts in, same thing we would do with a financial advisor, same thing we would do with a martial arts school, anybody else, is if somebody's highly qualified, they're going to be treated somebody who might be good enough, but we're not sure yet, versus somebody who clearly is not a good fit, right? So somebody who's not a good fit is, you can just kind of put them into oblivion and you do nothing. Or you could sell them a book or sell them a product or something, but you're not going to personally work with them. And you don't even have to say that. I mean, it's hard enough to get somebody, on the phone. Somebody who's clearly not qualified, you could put them over here and sell them a book or sell them a group program or something, but you're not going to sit down with them face to face. But, our process is, if somebody's highly qualified, they're going to get sequential autoresponder text messaging. They're going to get sequential autoresponder direct mail. They're going to get sequential autoresponder automated voicemail. They're going to get sequential autoresponder mail, which would include postcards, popcorn with a note, the big box of crap, and then another follow-up to that, among other things. So at one end, they're going to get, saturation bombed. At the middle end, they might get digital follow-up some mail, but it's not going to be spend $100 or $200. And at the lowest end, they might get a few emails, but they're not going to really get any of that other stuff. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yeah. I still would like to know what that little key is for.
That what?
The key in the little box.
Oh, it's a USB.
I keep forgetting to ask you. What do you do with that?
You know what a thumb drive is, right?
Oh, that's what it is.
Yeah, it's a thumb drive.
Okay.
And we've been using two versions of it. The key, which just plugs into a USB drive, and a plastic business card, which same thing, it folds out and it plugs
Oh
into.
my God.
Right. And there's all kinds of I forget the name of the company, Mindy. What's the name of the company? There's a bunch of them, but they were really
FlashPay.
Flash. I was over my accountant's office today, and he asked me about that. I was like, FlashPay. What do I? Oh, USB drives.
Yeah, most people call them flash drives, actually.
Yeah, there you go.
That's what I call them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You too could have one of these.
Yeah, because flash is the storage mechanism.
Yeah.
This is so cool. So you don't open this little thing up, you just put it in like this, or am I supposed to?
Well, the key, you just stick it in the USB drive.
You don't have to bend anything in the back.
No.
It just pops out. And they make all kinds of interesting things that you can do that with. Everything from a key that, looks like it could be a Porsche or Mercedes key, all the way down to, in fact, I've seen people who have keychains with flash drives, and so they can back up stuff and keep it on their keychain. Seems kind of dangerous to me, given the way I lose things, but there's all kinds of different versions. But as a marketing tool, what the only reason for adopting that is some folks don't have a CD player anymore, don't have a DVD player.
Oh, okay.
Now, the demographic that you're mostly targeting still likely do, right? Like, in my house, my daughter, I bought her a mini Countryman as she went off to college, and it was the first time I had seen them. They sold the car with no CD player. It had the upgraded stereo, whatever it is, but it had built-in Spotify, and it had built-in CarPlay, and it had built-in Pandora and all of the other crap. But basically, it didn't have any way. And I've seen cars that have USB drives, so you can plug a flash drive and play music, but it didn't have a CD player, right? And so, in her case, she's college age. But if you send her a DVD, she has nothing to play it on. Her Apple laptop doesn't have a drive. It just has, in fact, it has new,
my laptop doesn't have a place to put a DVD at all.
Yeah, mine doesn't. In fact, mine doesn't have, I need an adapter for the USB drive because it's got the little USB. What is it? USB-C, not USB.
Yeah.
Whatever it's called. But anyway, Suzanne, any questions on this before I saw Bob tuning in there?
This was just really great. I feel definitely spoiled today. And I look forward to getting together with you, Greg.
Yeah, we're going to talk about website stuff. Mindy booked with me.
And I'd like to learn about, what do I need to do and get to be able to tie things together like you guys do. Maybe not as detailed, but certainly ways in which I'm electronically responding to people like that.
Well,
right?
Without it being another 30 minutes, I would say the most important element of all is a human being initiating an outbound call immediately. And the most difficult part of that is almost everybody gives you a cell phone number nowadays, and almost nobody answers the phone with a phone number they don't recognize.
That's true.
what we're always trying to do is get a contact record into their phone, sometimes called a V card. But we have it automated where automatically, they get sent a text that happens to have the V card in it. And then we train everybody that every time you make an outbound call, leave a voicemail, but text them. But a part of the text is send them your contact record and say, oh, by the way, add to contacts. And that way you'll have our contact information and, directions to find us, email, etc. Right. But that way, at least if they don't answer the phone, they know they're ignoring you rather than they're just, ignoring a unknown number. And then the other piece that I think most people disregard, most financial advisors, and I'm overgeneralizing, but it sounds like almost like pretty much everybody we talk to, they think that email follow-up is good enough. And email is really dying a slow and painful death. It was pre-COVID, I would say it was dying a fast and painful death. But COVID resurrected it a little bit. People who are working from home had to watch emails coming from the office, depending upon what software system they were having. Kids who were learning by Zoom and stuff, remotely, they had to watch, the parents had to watch for stuff coming from the teachers and so forth. So it resurrected it a little bit. It's kind of like QR codes. But frankly, people who are in the category that you want from a standpoint of income and assets also are the ones that are getting inundated with email. And plus there's deliverability problems and everything else. So I'd say the second most important part of the follow-up is sequential autoresponder text messaging. Text messaging still, you're going to get essentially 100% of the people. Very few people don't have a mobile number that's going to receive texts. And it has essentially 100% open rate. And the response rate is much, much, much higher than it is. Email, what would you say, Greg, nowadays the deliverability rate is on email?
20% is the last data.
Deliverability or open?
Deliverability. Deliverability rate. Yeah.
That seems low, but then open rate, assuming they know who you are and are interested and you write a good subject line and everything else is still in the 20%.
Yeah, if you're mailing to a list and you got to deal with the server, you got to deal with your server, their server, everything in between. You got to deal with their email client, whether or not it's spammed at their email client, it's spammed at their server. Just to get in their email box.
Yeah. Now that's assuming that you're using a list, constant contact, AWeber or something like that. That's not, you're sitting down at your Gmail and you're sending them a personal note.
Got it.
Those are mostly going to get through. But then whether they open them or not is a completely different issue.
Yeah. Or a good old fashioned card that you write a note on.
Exactly. Yeah. That's going to get, everybody's going to open that. It's a conversation for another time about direct mail. But,
I'd like to do that. Yeah.
Well, be sure and watch that video we did on 3D mail. That's the company that'll mail a bank bag, message in a bottle, trash can, all kinds of stuff.
Where do I go to see that?
It's in the Facebook group.
Okay. And what is it called?
Direct Mail Secrets and 3D Mail is in the title.
Okay.
Mindy, we better turn you over to Bob and you and Bob, and Greg and I can bail out here.
So this is for gifts. This is the mailing gifts thing. Okay.
Well, mailing mail that has some sort of something in it, not a gift.
I've got an example
here. I've got he went to go get.
Do you have a sample, Mindy?
Yeah, I've got the metal right here. Okay, I said that.
And then the other thing is I need to find the webinar you did about books, writing a book?
I posted that in the Facebook group.
Okay,
Are you able to access the Facebook group now?
I am
Okay,
I'm-
so that's in the Facebook group. You can,
learning how to.
yeah, you can watch that live.
Here's a couple simple examples. So, what Mindy's holding up is a mailing we just did that has like
Oh,
agency. It's kind of a what's the
An Olympic and a fake gold medal theme.
no, I'm thinking
neat.
the supplier. Greg,
3D nail.
no, the one that we use for party supplies and stuff.
Oh, Oriental Trading.
Oriental Trading. Yeah, it's kind of a cheap little Oriental Trading metal. Here's another example. This is a pill bottle.
Yeah.
And so you can actually mailing label it. And, here I'm going to solve all your headaches about running out of money in retirement,
Yeah.
something like that. You could also mail it in an envelope, but attach a little packet of aspirin, same basic headline. Do you have headaches, worrying about running out of money in retirement? I'll solve those.
Yeah.
Right. But it's grabbers, or it's using something interesting, a bank bag or something as the envelope. The metal would be kind of a little lumpy, so they're kind of curious, but it's a grabber of what is this? Why did they send me a gold medal? So it gets them to pay attention.
A long time ago, when networking was, it's still good, but when, in the 80s, I would staple a dollar bill on each of my business cards.
Yeah.
And
good.
that was a way that I could stand out for the crowd, and they would call me, "You're the lady who gave me $1," kind of thing. Tell me what, it was a great opener. And I'm thinking, why don't I start doing some of the things I did before?
Well, right. And one of the most classic direct mail piece of all time, written by a very famous direct marketer by the name of Gary Halbert, is literally that. It's the dollar bill letter. And so he staples a dollar bill to the top, or $100 bill FedEx to the CEO of, a big company, or
Right.
it could be, a peso or whatever. But he started out with it being a dollar bill. And the, the classic line was, as you can see, I've attached a dollar to, dollar bills to this letter. Why have I done that? One, I have something very important to tell you about your finances and retirement, wanting to get your attention. Two is, right, so lead in with that. And nobody's going to get a letter with $1 attached or $100 bill attached, or, I use fake $1 million bills a lot, and not read the letter, or at least not read, the opening intro to it. There's another example of being in a big trade show event.
Mm-hmm.
And how everybody does, the foam worry ball and all the different crap that they give out, and one thing or another. And there was, one of my friends, actually, what they gave out was dollar bills. And so instead of people going over to get their free yardstick, and he figured out every one of these other little kitschy things was costing more than $1.
Exactly.
And people were flocking to the booth to get $1 free, right?
$3.
Yeah. So like you're talking about, the dollar bill had their information attached to it, and it was a sure way to get a line. Well, we do at a lot of trade show events is use a prize wheel. So a big prize wheel with LED lights. And Greg, you'd appreciate it. Even up here in Evergreen, there was an arts festival recently, and nobody had a line in front of their booth except for the State Farm guy. And the State Farm guy had like 100 people lined up, all waiting to spin the wheel to try to win whatever prizes he was giving away. In fact,
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's like Vegas.
Exactly. Hey, Mindy, why don't you, we'll turn it over to you and Bob a little bit. I know, Greg, you and I have another meeting we have to go to. And we're going to do that in the Tuesday room, if that works for you. Are you still okay on time?
Yep.
Okay. I will see you there.
Okay.
Bye, guys.
Goodbye.